Hey guys, welcome to Crosswalk. My name's Noah. In case you guys didn't know, I'm the Associate Minister for Reach Out on campus, and I'm going to be leading the teaching tonight, so get ready because it's a doozy. Not really. Tonight I'm going to be talking about how God turns obstacles into opportunities. And the big obstacle that I think a lot of people are dealing with, and it's what I'm going to talk about tonight, is COVID. And this topic came up because I've been hearing a lot of questions about COVID and about what our future is going to look like. Is everything going to look normal whenever we get a vaccine? Are we still going to have to do certain measures to make sure everybody stays safe? When is the vaccine coming? Just a lot of questions like that. And I think all those questions kind of boil down into the same question. And that question is this an interruption or is this a disruption? And what I mean by that is this a temporary thing or is this a permanent thing? I think we all tend to think of COVID as this big, huge obstacle in our lives. But one thing I want to talk about tonight is what if it's not? What if this is actually an opportunity for God to work in everybody's lives? What if this is an opportunity for Him to lead others to get to know Him better, to get to know Jesus? And I think it's important to know that this wouldn't be the first time that God has used an unfortunate circumstance to lead others to Him. In fact, He's actually done it a few times. And one of the times I want to talk about actually happens in Acts. So if you guys will turn to Acts chapter 1, verse 8, we're going to learn about the mission that the disciples were given by Jesus before He ascends into heaven. He tells them, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all of Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." So that's His mission for them before he goes into heaven. That's one of the last things He says to them. He tells them that you're to spread the good news. You're to be the witnesses of me in Jerusalem, in Judea, and all of Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth. But one thing to remember about what happens after that is that the disciples they go to Jerusalem. They do part of their mission, but they don't do all of it. They stay in Jerusalem, and the reason for that is because that's where a lot of their homes were. That's where they had spent the past few years. So it was really comfortable for them to stay in Jerusalem. It was too tough for them to go out to faraway places they hadn't been before. That just seemed like too much, and it was easy to stay at home where they had experienced success, where they had greatly expanded the number of witnesses to their testimonies. So why would they go somewhere where there's the chance of them not being successful when they had already been so successful in Jerusalem? And now I want you guys to turn to Acts chapter 8, verse 1. And this is really the thing that kicks God's plan into gear. It starts out with Saul approving of the execution of Stephen, but it goes on to say, "And there arose on that day a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles." So it's talking about the disciples there. So there's this persecution in the church, and it forces all the disciples to leave. It forces them to go to Judea and Samaria, which sounds really familiar because that's where Jesus wanted them to go in the first place. And because of this great persecution, this thing that they couldn't control, it forced them to leave. It forced them to leave their homes. They couldn't go to church anymore because they were being persecuted for going there. So they were forced to leave and go spread the good news in Judea and Samaria, and then eventually to the ends of the earth. For further proof of that, let's look at Acts chapter 11, verse 19, where it says, "Now those who were scattered because of the persecution that arose over Stephen traveled as far as Phoenicia and Cyprus and Antioch." So there's the rest of it. That's where it goes to the ends of the earth. They go crazy far, and they spread the good news. Because of that persecution, because of that bad thing, they were forced to go out, and they spread the good news because of that. So that's just one instance of God using an unfortunate circumstance to spread His word, to fulfill His plan. He's got his plan, and it's gonna work out one way or another, even if it's due to due to an unfortunate thing. Um, so I want to ask you guys: is COVID an obstacle or is it an opportunity? I think we can see it's starting to be an opportunity. One thing it definitely is, it's definitely a challenge for us to distinguish between our methods and our mission. And I'll get into that. Before I do, I want to share a quote by Andy Stanley, he's a big preacher in Atlanta. I can't remember the name of his church, but his quote is, "Date your method, but marry your mission." And what he means by that is you should hold loosely to your methods because you're going to have to adapt those in order to stay with the times. But you should hold tightly to your mission because that should never change. Your mission shouldn't be loosey-goosey. It shouldn't be changing around all the time. You should keep your mission tight and close to your heart. And I think that's good advice not only for churches but for businesses, for organizations, even for individuals. You should keep your mission the same as you go on because hopefully you had good intentions whenever you created that mission, whatever it may be, but you should stick to it through whatever you go through. And one good example of a business not sticking to their mission, or they stuck too tightly actually to their methods, is Blockbuster. And I know some of you guys are young and might not know what Blockbuster is, but Blockbuster used to be a store that was everywhere. There were two of them in my hometown of only like 20,000 people, and there were two of them. But it used to be this place where you could go and you could rent DVDs or VHSs back in the day, and you could rent a movie or whatever it may be for a week, and then you'd have to return it at the end of the week. Obviously, that doesn't happen today because Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and all the other ones, Disney Plus, all the other ones, Blockbuster kind of got run out of business because of those. One thing you guys may not know is that Reed Hastings, I think is his name, he's the CEO of Netflix. He actually approached the CEO of Blockbuster back in the day and said, "Hey, I want us to be partners. I got this great idea for a mail order DVD system, and eventually we're going to start this streaming thing whenever we get it up and running. But we want you to be our brick and mortar, and then we'll be all the online stuff. We'll deal with all of that, but we'll be partners." And in case you didn't know, it didn't really turn out well for Blockbuster because that CEO, he said no. He kind of laughed in the guy's face, in the now multi-billionaire or whatever he is, Reed Hastings. He laughed in his face because he thought that this whole streaming thing wasn't going to be popular. He thought it was just going to go by the wayside, and everybody would still want to go to Blockbuster and pick out their movies and return it a week later. He didn't really believe in Netflix. Obviously, today we can see that he was wrong because there's only one functioning Blockbuster left in the world. It's actually pretty famous on Twitter. It's really famous on Twitter if you guys want to look it up. But I think that's just a great example of a business sticking to their method when perhaps they should have adjusted their method so that they could still be in business, so that they wouldn't fail. Another question I have for you guys is, what would happen if the church fell into the same trap as Blockbuster? What if we stuck to our methods too tightly? What if we were like, no, we don't need to adapt to this online thing. We don't need to do Zoom. We need to stay in these buildings because that's the only way people can get to know Jesus. That's the only way we can grow our church, and the only way we can become more strong in our faith. I think we'd end up the same as Blockbuster if we did that. And obviously we haven't. I'm talking to you guys through YouTube, which we're all seeing through Zoom. So we've definitely, at Reach Out on Campus, we've definitely tried to adapt and change up our method. But I think as a church as a whole, as Christians, we're kind of lagging behind in that. One thing I always heard growing up, and you guys have probably heard it too, is that the church isn't the building, it's the people inside of it. And I think that's really relevant to today because not everybody gets to meet in that building every week. We have to go and we have to socially distance, and we can only meet in groups of 10 or less than 10. And that's a really good example of the church isn't where we meet. It's not the building. It's not that brick and mortar. It's the people inside of it. We can split up into small groups and we're still the church. But I think a lot of Christians are really so tied to the building that they think that's the only way they can do church, and they're struggling because of that. And I think obviously that's not the case. In fact, Jesus, I want us to look at what Jesus has said, or some things he has said. So if you'll turn to Matthew 4:19, this is whenever he's gaining disciples. It says, "And he said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men.'" That's a really good picture of what Jesus was all about. Jesus was all about people. He's about reaching people, reaching those who were lost. And he's telling the disciples there, instead of fishing for fish, I'll make you fishers of men. And I think that's what we're all about at Reach Out on Campus. We're trying to reach more people. Obviously, that's why we're called Reach Out on Campus. But in case you guys didn't know, I want to share some of our core beliefs, or our mission. And they are, it's belonging to God and each other, which is our first one. Our second one is becoming more like Christ. And then our third and final one is being sent to love, serve, and disciple. That's Rock's core beliefs. That's our main mission. That's what we're trying to do on the campus of Ohio University and Rio Grande. The last thing I'll leave you guys with is from Psalm 127:1. And I hope this kind of wraps everything up, but if it doesn't, I'm sorry. I think there's trees falling behind me. Psalm 127:1 says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain." So unless we keep our mission aligned with God's, we do it in vain. We're doing it for ourselves. Our mission is to reach people. It's to belong, to become, and be sent. There's no way a disease like COVID is a worthy obstacle for our God who can work through all these different things. No, instead, I think it's just another opportunity for us to bring more people to Christ.